All right, we are officially live and we're a little bit earlier. I've kind of been clicking the start broadcast button at about 4:59, so we're going to go with it. It is Saturday, October 28th, 2017, and you're tuned in to the last Pet Spooktacular episode of the year. We are the Missy Show, and we're still your premier source for fun and informative pet topics. I'm your host, Jay. And unfortunately, we don't have Dee. Dee was working hard to be here for this one, but unfortunately, the stars didn't align that way, so I'll be going solo. Today's episode title is Halloween. Is it evil? But before we attempt to answer that question and get into that topic, I want to let you guys know that we won't have a Missy Show episode next week. So nothing's going to air on November 4th. We will come back with a new episode on November 11th, but after that, there will be no more November episodes. So we're going to, after November 11th, we'll kind of chill out on any Google Hangout episodes as far as the Missy Show. But we will show back up on December 2nd. We will continue to be active on our blog and social media pages from now through the end of the year. So don't worry about that. That presence won't disappear. Now, that does not mean that we'll have an episode, not an episode. That doesn't mean that we'll have a post or like we'll be on social media like every single day. But we'll be on there like, our average, a couple of times a week, at least like 3 times a week. So make sure you're checking the blog and make sure you're still checking our Google Plus account, Facebook, and Twitter. Okay, so now on to today's topic. Is Halloween evil? Should it be celebrated? Okay, and I know this seems kind of weird, but first off, and I'm not going to assume that everyone knows what Halloween is, because we may have some listeners in other countries where Halloween isn't that big of a thing and it's not as commercialized as it is here in the United States. So I'm just going to kind of tell you guys what Halloween is and how it originated. Now, bear with me once again, as I say, when Dee isn't on here with me and I kind of have to do a lot of reading, my voice tends to want to give out. I have no idea why. I'd make a horrible singer. I am a horrible singer, but just having to hold notes and do all that, it's something about talking for extended periods of time. I really don't see how people do it. And I'll probably make a sucky broadcaster, but here goes. So just bear with me. Now, this first bit of information I obtained from history.com, and the title of the article is The History of Halloween. So this will kind of give you a little bit of a background. And I've got a lot of information, but I won't try to like read all of that to y'all. So just remember, as usual, we will be like posting it on our social media pages so you guys can take a look for yourself. Okay, so Halloween is an annual holiday celebrated each year on October 31st that has roots in age-old European traditions. It originated with the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. I think it's Samhain. As a younger kid, I used to always say it was Samhain because it's actually spelled Samhain. But on everything I've been reading, I think it's pronounced Samhain. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that for people who really get off into that. But yeah, it originated with the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, when people would light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off ghosts. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as a time to honor all saints. Soon, that became All Saints' Day. And that was incorporated, that incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain. The evening before was known as All Hallows Eve. And later, All Hallows Eve became known as Halloween. So that was just like a little overview thing. But okay, here's the getting into the meat of the main article. Okay, ancient origins of Halloween. Halloween's origins date back to the Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts, who lived about 2,000 years ago in the area that is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1st. So just like how most of us nowadays consider January 1st to be the beginning of the new year, for them it was November 1st. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with human death. Celts believed that on the night before the new year, which would be October 31st, because New Year is November 1st for them, or it was at that time, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. So on October 31st, that's when the boundaries became blurred and the veil was kind of very thin between the living and the dead. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghost of the dead returned to Earth. Okay. In addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids, who were Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future. For a people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, these prophecies were an important source of comfort and direction during the long, dark winter. So you got to think about, these were people where, you know, just like now when standard time comes around, which like next weekend, time will fall back for us here in the United States, and it'll get darker early. You know, like for us, it's just like, okay, that's normal. We live in modern times. That doesn't scare us. And we're not just so dependent on crops and all these things like they were in those days. But you have to think about, they were also probably in areas where the winters were very extreme. And then when the days got shorter, that was a scary time for them, because they didn't understand, you know, the stuff that we understand now about the seasons and all that. So I can understand why that was a scary time for them. Okay, so to commemorate the event, Druids built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes typically consisting of animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, which they had extinguished earlier that evening, from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the coming winter. Okay, now by 43 AD, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the Celtic territory, as they pretty much took over everything, but that's a whole nother topic. In the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, 2 festivals of Roman origin were combined with the traditional Celtic celebration of Samhain. The first was Feralia, a day in late October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. The second was a day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, and the incorporation of this celebration into Samhain probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples that's practiced today on Halloween. There's also a different reason why they were kind of bobbing for apples, and I'll kind of touch on that just a little bit later in this same article. Okay, so here's the deal with All Saints Day. On May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface the Fourth dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs, and the Catholic Feast of All Martyrs Day was established in the Western Church. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include all saints as well as all martyrs, and moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. So this is how we get our All Saints Day, which is the day after Halloween. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread into the Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted the older Celtic rites. In 1000 AD, the church would make November 2nd All Souls Day. So we could have All Saints Day November 1st, and we have All Souls Day November 2nd. And All Souls Day is a day to honor the dead. It's widely believed today that the church was attempting to replace the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related church-sanctioned holiday. All Souls Day was celebrated similarly to Samhain, with big bonfires, parades, and dressing up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. The All Saints Day celebration was also called All Hallows or All Hallowmas, from the English word all All Hallow Messy Mess, something like that. So, meaning All Saints Day. So, the night before it, the traditional night of Samhain in the Celtic religion began to be called All Hallows Eve, and eventually that was contracted to Halloween. Okay, so I'm going to skip over part of the stuff in this article, and I'm going to jump to something called soul cakes. And that may kind of give us an idea of how the trick-or-treating side of it sort of got going. The American Halloween tradition of trick-or-treating probably dates back to the early All Souls Day parades in England. During the festivities, poor citizens would beg for food, and families would give them pastries called soul cakes in return for their promise to pray for the family's dead relatives. The distribution of soul cakes was encouraged by the church as a way to replace the ancient practice of leaving food and wine for roaming spirits. The practice, which was referred to as going a-souling, also kind of seems similar to caroling a little bit, except they're not singing, was eventually taken up by children who would visit the houses in their neighborhood and be given ale, food, and money. The tradition of dressing in costume for Halloween has both European and Celtic roots. Hundreds of years ago, winter was an uncertain and frightening time. Food supplies often ran low, and for the many people afraid of the dark, the short days of winter were full of constant worry. On Halloween, when it was believed the ghosts came back to the earthly world, people thought that they would encounter ghosts if they left their homes. To avoid being recognized by those ghosts, people would wear masks when they left their homes after dark so that the ghosts would mistake them for fellow spirits. On Halloween, to keep ghosts away from their houses, people would place bowls of food outside their homes to appease the ghosts and prevent them from attempting to enter. So that's kind of part of why, potentially, I guess, people dress up. That's sort of like the origins of it. And maybe even with the trick-or-treating, like with people originally going around for the soul cakes. There's some more on that in some of the other articles. But this was one other thing that I found interesting in this history.com article. It talks about Halloween matchmaking. And I never knew this part. So this was like, okay, very cool. Well, I won't say cool. It was just interesting. Well, what about the Halloween traditions and beliefs that today's trick-or-treaters have forgotten all about? Yeah, because we don't do this nowadays. Well, I won't say everyone doesn't do it, but probably most people don't. Many of these obsolete rituals focus on the future instead of the past, and the living instead of the dead. Okay, let's see. In particular, many had to do with helping young women identify their future husbands and reassuring them that they would someday, with luck, by next Halloween, be married. In 18th century Ireland, a matchmaking cook might bury a ring in her mashed potatoes on Halloween night, hoping to bring true love to the diner who found it. In Scotland, fortune tellers recommended that an eligible young woman name a hazelnut for each of her suitors and then toss the nuts into the fireplace. The nut that burned to ashes rather than popping or exploding, the story went, represented the girl's future husband. In some versions of this legend, the opposite was true. The nut that burned away symbolized a love that would not last. Another tale had it that if a young woman ate a sugary concoction made out of walnuts, hazelnuts, and nutmeg before bed on Halloween night, she would dream about her future husband. Young women tossed apple peels over their shoulders, hoping that the peels would fall on the floor in the shape of their future husband's initials. Okay, that's a bit much. Tried to learn about their futures by peering at egg yolks floating in a bowl of water, and stood in front of mirrors and darkened rooms holding candles and looking over their shoulders for their husbands' faces. Okay, that's a bit creepy. I really don't even like looking in mirrors in a dark room. No. Kind of reminds me too much of that thing called scrying. But yeah, don't want to do that. Other rituals were more competitive. At some Halloween parties, the first guest to find a burr on a chestnut hunt would be the first to marry. At others, the first successful apple bobber would be the first down the aisle. Of course, whether we're asking for romantic advice or trying to avoid 7 years of bad luck, each one of these Halloween superstitions relies on the goodwill of the very same spirits whose presence the early Celts felt so keenly. So that was a really interesting article, and I of course wasn't able to like read everything, so I'll be sure to post this. This one I'm thinking about maybe posting on my blog on Halloween Day. I'm debating that. I may go ahead and just put it on here tonight, but I may actually just let this be my blog post and I just put it on there and you guys can read it on there for any of you who missed this show. Okay, the second one, this comes from the Facts on Halloween. Let's see. Well, no, that was just a part of that was excerpted from that. I'll get the article name for you. I think, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, the Facts on Halloween. Okay, the Druids were actually, they were the educated or priestly class of the Celtic religion. Because we've all heard of the Druids, but we were like, exactly, okay, who are they? We kind of just think of these hooded figures and you think of Stonehenge. But basically, they were the priests of the Celts. The Celts themselves were the first Aryan people who came to Asia to settle in Europe. In fact, we can see certain similarities between Druidism and the religion of India. Now, I'm not going to go into that part. I'll let you guys read that. But let's see. What do I want to read from here? The Celts worship the sun god Belinus, especially on Beltane, May 1st. And they worshiped another god, apparently the Lord of Death or the Lord of the Dead, on Samhain, October 31st. Beltane, which also is like fire of Bel, was the time of the summer festival, whereas Samhain was the time of the winter festival. Now, according to this article, they're saying human sacrifice was offered during both occasions. Now, out of all the stuff that I've read, this is the only one where so far, that, not saying it's not a lot of stuff out there, where they kind of mention human sacrifice. So, just going by what it's saying on here. According to Julius Caesar and his commentaries and other sources, the Celts believe they were descended from the god Dis. It's D-I-S, a tradition handed down from the Druids. Dis was the Roman name for the god of the dead. Let's see here. Trying to see what I wanted to read here on this one, because I hated to just read you the same stuff. But some of them, they kind of just spin it a slightly different way. Let's see. The Celts and their Druid priests began their new year on November 1st, which we already stated, and that marked the beginning of winter. They apparently believed that on October 31st, the night before their new year and the last day of the old year, Samhain gathered the souls of the evil dead who had been condemned to enter the bodies of animals. He then decided what animal form they would take for the next year. The souls of the good dead were reincarnated as humans. The Druids also believed that the punishment of the evil dead could be lightened by sacrifices, prayers, and gifts to Samhain. Druid worshippers attempted to satisfy and please this deity because of his power over the souls of the dead, whether these souls were good or evil. For those who had died during the preceding 12 months, Samhain allowed their spirits to return to earth, to their former places of habitation, for a few hours to associate once again with their families. As a result of this belief, the Celts taught that on their New Year's Eve, which is Halloween, ghosts, evil spirits, and witches roam the earth. In order to honor the sun god, which is Belinus, and to frighten away evil spirits who allegedly feared fire, large bonfires were lit on hilltops. The outstanding feature of Samhain was the burning of a great fire. Samhain was also a festival of the dead, whose spirits at this season were thought of as scouring the countryside, causing dread to the folk at large. To expel them from the fields and the precincts of villages, lighted brands from the bonfire were carried around the district. Divination for the fate of the individual throughout the year were engaged in. So they were kind of big on trying to, do fortune telling on this night. They thought that because there was such a thin veil between the living and the dead, that having their fortunes told was an easier task, and I guess the druids were the ones, the priest class, who were supposed to be able to do this. On this night, evil or frustrated ghosts were also believed to play tricks on humans and cause supernatural manifestations, just like poltergeists today. As part of the celebration, people dressed in grotesque masks and danced around the great bonfires, often pretending they were being pursued by evil spirits. In addition, food was put out to make the ghosts or souls of the good dead Samhain had released feel welcomed and at home. Because Samhain marked the beginning of a new year, and interest in divination, the magic art of interpreting the unknown by interpreting random patterns or symbols, and fortune telling became an important part of this holiday. Yeah, I'm gonna skip out on the rest of that part. I won't read all that. And in this article, I want to tell you guys about kind of how our American tradition, because that's more the origins of it. Let's see here. Okay, now as far as America, it wasn't widely observed. Halloween wasn't widely observed until about the 20th century. Initially, it was practiced only in small Irish Catholic settlements until thousands of Irish immigrants, until thousands of Irish migrated to America during the Great Potato Famine and brought their customs with them. To some degree, our modern Halloween is an Irish holiday with early origins in the Celtic Winter Festival. Interestingly, in American culture, the rise and popularity of Halloween also coincides roughly with the national rise in Spiritism that began in 1848. So that's interesting. Ireland is the only place in the world where Halloween is actually a national holiday, celebrated with fireworks. Children are even released from school for the week. Didn't know that either. That's very interesting. Let's see. Oh, yes. Now, this was another interesting tidbit on where the jack-o'-lantern originated. The carved pumpkin may have originated with the witch's use of a collection of skulls with a candle in each to light the way to coven meetings. But among the Irish, who, as noted, prompted the popularization of Halloween in America, the legend of Irish Jack explains the jack-o'-lantern. According to the legend, a stingy drunk named Jack tricked the devil into climbing an apple tree for an apple, but then cut the sign of a cross into the trunk of the tree to prevent the devil from coming down. Jack then forced the devil to swear he would never come after Jack's soul. The devil reluctantly agreed. Jack eventually died, but he was turned away at the gates of heaven because of his drunkenness and life of selfishness. He was sent to the devil, who also rejected him, keeping his promise. Since Jack had no place to go, he was condemned to wander the earth. As he was leaving hell, he happened to be eating a turnip. The devil threw a live coal at him. So Jack put the coal inside the turnip and has since forever been roaming the earth with his jack-o'-lantern in search of a place to rest. Eventually, pumpkins replaced turnips since it was much easier to symbolize the devil's coal inside a pumpkin. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see here. Now, this is also a take about trick-or-treating. Let's see, as already noted, Halloween was thought to be a night when mischievous and evil spirits roam freely. As in modern poltergeist lore, mischievous spirits could play tricks on the living, so it was advantageous to hide from them by wearing costumes. Masks and costumes were worn to either scare away the ghosts or to keep them from being recognized by them. In Ireland especially, people thought that ghosts and spirits roamed after dark on Halloween. They lit candles or lanterns to keep the spirits away. And if they had to go outside, they wore costumes and masks to frighten the spirits or to keep from being recognized by these unearthly beings. Another thing regarding like the jack-o'-lanterns, besides just the jack little legend thing that I just read, was, you know, also how they were talking about the people having the bonfires and coming together, and like they would have a turnip with them or whatever, or something like that, and they would just take an ember from the bonfire and they would drop that in their little turnip, and then they would use that to, you know, bring back to their homes, and they would put that ember into their own hearth and relight their own hearth. So that's also part of the jack-o'-lantern origin sort of deal too, because originally it was a pumpkin. So that may be like the real reason of how it came about, and not so much just the jack legend. So you've got multiple things about that. Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to say regarding this one? Let's see. Going from door to door seeking treats may result from the druidic practice of begging material for the great bonfires. And then, of course, we already talked about the soul cake. So some of that was just, you know, you've got random different versions of that, you know, people going around, you know, about the soul cakes and things like that. And then also, you know, people going around begging for material for their bonfires. Okay, here's my thing. Based on the research that I found, the beginnings of it, very, very pagan. And of course, if you're a Christian, you're probably not going to be comfortable with wanting to celebrate that, even though I think most people who celebrate Halloween nowadays aren't like carrying out those, like, I mean, you're still dressing up and doing things like that, but you're not doing it for the same reasons that they were doing it. And definitely, if human sacrifice was a part of it, you know, people aren't doing that nowadays. Because the thing is, even with Christmas, it has pagan roots in it also. But I think most people are a little more comfortable with, you know, celebrating Christmas. One of the things that I've heard, which I didn't really get off into that side of it as much, I've heard that Halloween, you know, today's modern Halloween, set aside, you know, the origins of where it came from with the Druids and the Celtic people. I've heard that it is a big night for like Satanists and things like that. And people have sort of turned that night into their night to, you know, sort of cast spells and, you know, put spells over children's candy and do things to the candy and manipulate it. And of course, you know, we've had the, you know, rumors that used to go around since I was a child about people putting razor blades in candy or poisoning candy, and that's always a real thing anyway. So you're always going to have some psychos and sickos out there who are going to, you know, try to do something like that. And of course, no young children should be out there unattended anyway. Now, that side of it, I could understand why maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to celebrate it if that is true, that, you know, Satanists or different groups use it for negative reasons and they're out there doing negative things and, you know, casting spells over things. I know not everybody believes in that type of stuff or that that's possible. So yes, I could definitely see on the safe side that might not be something that you want to do, and maybe it would be safer to just buy your own candy and just, you know, do something with your kids at home. But ultimately, this episode wasn't to try to sway you one way or the other. If, you know, as a Christian, you are persuaded and you feel like, you know, the Lord is leading you to not participate in that, then of course, listen, you know, follow your heart and, you know, go in the way that you're being led and don't participate in it. This was just me doing research about it. There's a lot more out there, and, you know, and this has gotten me really curious, and I will have to look into the side of it that I've heard regarding, you know, like Satanists or things like that, or witches or whomever, you know, using it for negative purposes and, you know, doing, because I've heard that there are real sacrifices, but I don't know how much of that is just like urban legends and things. I've heard some preachers, you know, preach about that, you know, how they have their information and how they know this for sure, I don't know. But I'm not knocking that at all. That could very well be what's going on Halloween. But I guess that could also be on any night. But I guess some people, because of the background of it, they've chosen this to be a night where they want to do something extra. They want to do something unsavory, and you know, especially with all these children out here. So for me, I just say, if you're led to not celebrate it, then by all means, you know, don't celebrate it. And if you are led to celebrate it, then celebrate it until, you know, you feel otherwise. That's how I feel. I'm not super big on it. We do decorate for it, but that's one of those holidays where I can easily let that go, you know, because I enjoy Christmas. It would be kind of harder for me to let go of Christmas, but Halloween is something that I could let go of. I think I still would always want to decorate for the fall, though. Like, I might want to have some pumpkins on my porch and, you know, have a fall wreath and things like that. And, you know, have my scarecrows out and stuff. You know, now, of course, there are some people who are very extreme and feel like even that shouldn't be done. So that's why I just encourage all of you, do your own research, you know, as a Christian, meditate, be in the Word, you know, and I guess figure it out for yourself, or either, you know, just pray about that. But to each his own, you know, until otherwise. But just wanted to let you guys, you know, just be a part of this show with me as I did my research. Like I said, I'll post this all for you later. I don't know what our November 11th episode is going to be about yet, but when I get that posted, I will let you know, and I'll put that on the blog post. Just remember, we won't be having an episode next Saturday, which will be November 4th. And after the 11th, we won't have another one until the first Saturday in December. But I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. And if you are going to go trick-or-treating, please be safe. Definitely look out for your kids. Keep a close eye on them. And maybe even if you have preteens and things like that, still be with them. You know, I'm not big on letting kids just go too far by themselves. So just everybody be safe. And we will be back with another blog post. I'll have another one probably by midweek, maybe around Wednesday or so. I'll hit you guys up. So here's to having a wonderful weekend. And as far as the show, we will just see you guys back here on November 11th. And hopefully Dee will be back with me. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.